Hello, everyone, and welcome to the week ahead. This is the equinox, the day when the sun ingresses into the sign of Libra. So in the northern hemisphere, it's the fall, and in the southern hemisphere, it is the spring. And Libra is a cardinal sign, which represents this initiatory energy of changes. And part of what I'm reflecting on, we both have the sun in its ingress during this equinox in a cardinal sign, as do we have the moon in the sign of Capricorn. So there are really core shifts. This is a first quarter, just beyond a first quarter square. And we're shifting not only seasons, but reality, reality as in the structures of our lives have begun their final stages of integration. And we can see that from just reflecting on what this season is initiating us into is the eclipse season. So even though it's probably a good 2 weeks before we'll have our first eclipse, I think that this particular week in and of itself is like the eclipse portal or the opening portal. And, if we look at Sun in Libra, ruled by our, direct Venus in the sign of Leo. So they're in mutual, what we would call mutual reception to one another. So the sun is in a sign ruled by Venus, and Venus is in a sign ruled by the sun. And, Venus is still traveling with Juno through this self, the self is what is pioneering the presence of our healing path, the healing journey. And Venus is also in relationship to Mars in what we would consider probably getting close to, not quite there within degrees, but close to this Balsamic or closing phase where by the time Mars and Venus get all the way around to the sign of Capricorn much later in the year, they will be in a closing, and then they will make their conjunction in the sign of Aquarius in February. So we're in the wrapping up, but what I would call it is the longer, slower integration phase of not just what 2023 has been. For many people, I think these are closing cycles that have gone on the last several years, maybe even beyond that, right? Everything coming back to Pluto is coming back to a 248-year cycle. So that's beyond our lifetime. That's coming to its own sense of closure in the next year. But for this week, just in terms of our focus, we are moving in the energy of relationship. And relationship on its evolutionary journey is going to find us facing the ways we relate, facing the challenges to peace, the obstacles to love, right? The quote that I love, which is like, you don't have to seek for love. All you have to do is find and remove the obstacles to love. And in this case, these are the obstacles to relating. These are the obstacles. Pluto squaring this nodal axis and squaring the sort of relationship axis is activating the obstacles to our awareness of the presence of love, to our expression of the presence of love in all the many forms that relationship takes, right? Libra doesn't necessarily just relate to romantic relationships or communication in relationships, but it is that act of relating that comes through the desire for connection. And that desire connection, the desire for connection, right? The desire for balance, for harmony, the desire for experience in relationship. Jeffrey Wolf Green, when he speaks about Mars in the sign of Libra, speaks very specifically to the evolutionary impulse of the desire to seek many different expressions of relationship, or we could call it the desire to have many, a variety of relational experiences. Because in those relational experiences, we get to experience Mars, the opposite sign, Aries, what happens through our own direct will, through our own direct desire. It's often in relationships, whether there's conflict or harmony, where we find what happens with our will, what happens with who we are. Right? If we're simply deriving our lives in solitary confinement, moving in our own, we would never really see or experience what it is to touch or to bump up against one another, and to touch one another in a way where we feel the friction of like, oh, okay, this communication, this misunderstanding, this way of speaking, this way of acting, this need that I have, this desire that I have, this calling that I have for connection, and how those bring up, right? We're talking about the square in particular, and I'm just referencing this because here we have Mars, the moon squaring Mars as it's moving towards a conjunction with Pluto. And that aspect is triggering here in this. The square triggers the crisis of consciousness, right? The dynamic tension between, oh, what my desires are, what my needs are, what my feelings are, what would feel beautiful and harmonious to me, and the challenge of what my external environment actually is providing, the challenge of what the structures of our lives are actually giving, right? The crisis of where we might feel confined or oppressed or rejected, or, not like, oh, I'm not receiving the love that I desire, or I'm alone, or I'm, people are not responsive, or, whatever it is, we're not able to listen, right? Venus has to do with listening. We're not able to communicate. And Mercury is also now direct. So we have the beginning, at least from the perspective of the personal planets, where there is direct motion. They're both still in their shadow degrees. So we're still seeing a lot of the miscommunications or misunderstandings, or sort of topsy-turvy energy of the retrograde season present, in that things have to be resolved. Things have their resolution. And there may even be a feeling of like, some of these things in my life feel as though they are bigger than what can be resolved through my own will, even through my own relating, or through, like, there aren't enough conversations that we can have that will resolve the thing that seems to be the obstacle, the block. If the block to love is Pluto, at the end of Capricorn, right? It's a force immeasurable of what we have to do in order to move through the evolutionary change that would give way to a new way of relating. But that's a part of this whole square, is that it's almost guaranteed, it's embedded in the chart. that we have to give way to a new way of relating, right? To our lives, to each other, to humanity, to love, to relationship, to expectations, to needs, to desires, to touch and connection, to disconnection and disharmony, to repair and forgiveness, right? All these things, something has to give, right? And in the I Ching, there's a hexagram that I love, which is hexagram 49, radical change. Oh, I wish I had the book. I would read it to you. You know, and it basically is like saying on a new day dawns, there is something that has to be done that is so different than what has been done before. But I think a part of what we're doing in this time right now is actually learning how to do that. And I received a message and ceremony the other night that is, the message I got was, the recognition of our patterns is not what heals them. And that makes a lot of sense, because it's like we can be having quite a lot of self-awareness or even desires for new things, for new experiences, or we may even be like moving on in our lives in some respect to create new experiences. And often, even in the creation of new experiences, we've gone to another place, or we have a new relationship, or we're doing a new thing, and still the old patterns can come up. And even the recognition of those patterns, how they show up in our life, isn't the actual thing that heals the pattern, right? It isn't the thing. It may be the thing that gives way or opens the door for a path to healing. And as we move through the week this week, so the moon's going to move into an opposition with Venus and a trine to Mars when we get into Aquarius. And, paying attention to where the moon is has been one of the first and most primary things that I began to do when studying astrology, because the moon is sort of like the forerunner of everything. The personal planets are always reflecting that more mundane aspect of our own individual lives, right? And the outer planets reflecting the deeper and more collective and subconscious and unconscious content that is evolving through the mundane aspects of our lives. And with the moon, she's always moving through degrees faster than any other planet in the sky. So she is making contact with and initiating and calling us to and revealing elements throughout our week. And this is why we follow her, at least on the week ahead for me, because it's sort of like how you receive a little thread of information, and then it becomes reflected in everything that happens throughout the week. So an example of this, I watched this really awesome predictive video where she says, choose an image, and based on that image, I'm going to give you a prediction of what is going to come up for you for the month ahead. And she did that, and for the image that I chose, the prediction was that you're going to see owls everywhere. And it's true. All of a sudden, my mind, I recognize like, oh, okay, there's an owl in his t-shirt. There's an owl, there's an owl left in our living room that kids brought out. And then I see an owl on another card. And then when I'm thinking about something, I'm thinking about owl feathers. And throughout the course of the week, there were these subtle reflections of that initial thread of information. And that's kind of like what the moon is doing, in that there are changes coming in our lives. And if we're paying attention to the moon, it's like witnessing the signs and synchronicities of the larger unfolding of the cycles. And one of those most significant cycles are the eclipse cycles, that because they are tied to the nodal axis, the transiting nodal axis, which moves through each sign over the course of 18 months. And we'll have pairs of eclipses that will happen when a lunation, either a full moon or a new moon, happens within 10 degrees of those nodes, those points in space, basically. And so this week, we're in a growing phase of the moon where after this first quarter trine of the moon, and then we'll be moving towards a full moon at the end of the week. And this is an important and significant full moon. So first, before, in the lead way up to that full moon, we have a conjunction of the moon with Saturn. And Saturn's just coming to the end of this retrograde cycle, which has been a long and significant journey from 7 degrees Pisces all the way back to 0 degrees Pisces. And we will then see the moon come through and conjoin with Neptune, opposing Mercury this week. So, and you know what starts the week this week from a spiritual perspective, the high holy days are concluded with the holiday of Yom Kippur, which is on Sunday night into Monday. And it's generally a time of observation where from Sunday evening, you're fasting, praying. It is called the Day of Atonement. And it's essentially a day where we are said to have been written into the book of life, right? Rosh Hashanah, I talked last week in the video, is the Jewish New Year. And then Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement. And it is the day where we're sealed, right? Our fate is sealed for the next year ahead. And in this time, I've been really using this 10 days as a period of reflection and prayer. And even in the things that I've been reflecting on, amends that I want to make, or apologies that I'm actively making, or areas of my life that I'm looking at that are not working, right? Virgo season, things that are not functioning. And now this particular time that we're moving into is more about the resolution and the reconciliation and the repair and the active change, right? And in the same way, the recognition of our patterns isn't what heals the pattern. Even the repair of our past or the releasing of the past isn't necessarily what heals the past, right? The process of forgiveness is, I think, often one of the most challenging things for us to really understand, because it's not so easy to just say like, oh, I let go of it. Or sometimes time is what heals something. Sometimes when we're trying to, make amends or atone for a behavior or change a way that we've been, or even if we have a pattern of self-sabotage, recognizing that pattern, recognizing what it does to our lives doesn't necessarily mean that we're able to, or willing to, or available for the change yet. But I feel like everything is a part of the process of preparation, of healing, and of integration. And we're always in some particular stage of evolution relative to what's motivating us, right? What is motivating us at the bottom line? Pluto in the chart and evolutionary astrology refers to the bottom line of our desires. So in your own natal chart, or, right here, we're speaking about it by transit, but like, what is the bottom line desire of this soul for this life? And that question is a really really important question for us to be with, right? If our desires for our life are what are motivating us, conscious or unconscious desires here we're talking about, what is it that we are living and repeating that are reflecting these deeper desires, and how do we really get into a place where we're embodying those desires? I think of Mars as even the embodiment of that will, that desire, that movement, in order to realize them in our lives, right? And so anyways, going back to Yom Kippur, you have this day of really setting everything down. Like, this is a kind of the perfect day to Sunday night into Monday. And you could do this all week. You could do this for the equinox, to like set down all the things, do a consumption fast, put down all the, just for a day. Like, if you notice, what are the things that kind of consume your life, consume your energy? I was thinking about, how do people deal with worries that we have that are meaningless? Like, something I noticed, some descriptions that another astrologer used in one of her emails, and the way she was describing particular planets and particular attributes, I disagreed with like what she associated those things to. And then all of a sudden I realized, I'm thinking about this. I'm like worried about this. Do I need to email her and be like, though I don't actually think that those are the archetypal associations related to those signs, or can I let it go? Right. And then that led me to the realization, like, I'm actually worrying about something that really, I don't know that it matters, but I'm giving my energy to it, and I'm expressing it here because it's like, it's a real thing. We worry about things often in our lives that begin to take up significance in our energy, but are they truly within us as a desire? Do they truly matter? If they truly matter, then there's meaning in really reflecting on what we can do with those thoughts, right? How we might be able to change our behavior, what we might need to communicate, what we might need to express, what changes we might need to make in relationship, right? What, things we might actually need to let go of or release or identify that aren't working, that we have the power. Pluto has to do very much with reclaiming of our personal power. And with Venus in the sign of Leo, she's reflecting the sovereignty that we have over our heart, over our desires. And with Mars in Libra, that very much has to do with how do we want to relate to the masculine, to the feminine within us, within and without, right? Inside work, whatever is inside, that which is outside as well. And as we're approaching this full moon and culminating these very significant days of holiness, right? The equinox, Yom Kippur, the pathways that we're walking towards this eclipse season are walking us home to have a deeper relationship to that which we desire and to what is being felt emotionally. I feel like I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. Physically, bless you. Bless me. What is being healed? I think Pisces often has to do with this deeper healing. And there can be things off in our physical body. I was I was speaking to someone the other day who was like saying they were getting sick all the time. And, I noticed also since Saturn went into Pisces, like this immunity and immune system things, and what happens to us when our immune system gets worn down, weakened, right? We have to slow down. If everyone is sick, if you're unwell, there's like a certain sense of movement through our life is hindered. That would be a Saturn thing. And a part of what that does is it increases the response of the immune system towards healing. If something is out of balance in our life, if we're out of alignment with our desires, that is going to increase the response in our life towards healing. Now, this might take the place. It might show up in our life as things feeling more exaggerated, more intensified, more we have more awareness of what is not working, more awareness of what feels out of balance. Like the pain in a shoulder might bring more attention to the fact of more weight being on that shoulder, more, the other night in my ceremony, I had a greater experience of recognizing my need for rest, how deeply fatigued my body was, and how no matter what I try to do to caffeinate and move through my day and keep up with everything, all the demands upon my life, there isn't anything I can do to avoid the recognition of how out of balance I've been with rest. And all the different areas of my life where conflict exists all also point back to that need for rest. So there is really, in the idea that I was sharing earlier about this idea of consumption fasting, right? Letting go of whether you're fasting from food, alcohol, substances, whether you're fasting from social media or taking a break from buying things or consume. It's like a laying down of the system of the body, of everything that is keeping us from the connection to source, really, to that source that is within you. And a part of this reminds me of one the other message that I received during the ceremony, which was asking me, what kind of soul do you want to be? What kind of soul do you want to be? Now, a lot of the times in astrology, we're looking at the natal chart and seeing that as a reflection of the soul. And I received this question from Spirit. It's like, what kind of soul do you want to be? What kind of soul do you want to be? Most of the time in our conditioned world, we are being told who we are. You're given your name by your parents. You're being identified. Even when you go to an astrologer and they read your chart, oh, you're this. You're an Aries. You're a Scorpio. Oh yeah, your Venus is like this. You're that. You're being told what kind of soul you are. But the real question is, what kind of soul do you want to be? Because from an evolutionary perspective, that natal chart reflects a million, the 10,000 things, the 10,000 ways of evolution that can manifest through you as the source of who you are. And I personally believe there is no thing other than God's will that is written in, stone. There is no way that you are. If somebody had told me 10 years ago, Michelle, you're going to be an astrologer, I would have really thought that that was a funny thing that they were saying. I would have not believed you. I never would have imagined my life as it is today, right? That's the difference between God's will and what is. But that has never changed. So that 10 years ago, I still had the same Aquarius sun. That didn't necessarily change the definition of who I am. What kind of soul do I want to be? Right? There are so many different expressions. Even the present moment reflection of the natal chart is a reflection of everyone in this universe. The entirety of evolution is expressed in the chart of the present moment. And from your perspective, you're looking at it and seeing it just like you're seeing the world from the universe of yourself. And if we were to ask ourselves in this moment of polarity, because as we get to this full moon in Aries, we have a moment of polarity where the sun is in the sign of Libra and the moon is in the sign of Aries, this polarity, Mars ruling that moon, actually Mars being in the sign of its opposition, of its detriment in traditional astrology, right, ruled by Venus. This full moon energy is really pointing towards these polarities, masculine, feminine, Mars, Venus, internalized and expressed through the lens of every unique being on this planet. Everyone's going to have a different experience of this. But we're also having, at the same time as this full moon, Juno, Venus, and Hecate square to Uranus, right? Breakthroughs relative to this, understanding, embodiment, physical experience of who we are on this planet. And if we can ask ourselves, what kind of soul do I want to be? This could be the moment of realization, of expression, of final release, of opening and integration to actually becoming, right, that which we want to be. And, if we are the seed of an oak tree, we are becoming an oak. There are often some ways of expressions that we have not yet manifested, but it doesn't mean just because we haven't, just because you haven't experienced an emotionally attached, secure, loving relationship does not mean that you're not able, capable, or going to experience that yet in your lifetime. And the natal chart is not cursed because there are aspects in the chart that are challenging these crises, these ways in which we might be out of balance or not in touch with a part of our own evolution does not mean that it is not yet to become who we are. And I think the deeper cause of evolution is that all beings, all souls want to return to source. That's the bottom line desire that we're dealing with Pluto and with our evolution. And so if all souls want to return to source, want to know love, and we're in some sort of dance of resisting or cooperation with that bottom line desire, the simple question is, do we want to be love? Right? Or do we want to be fear? Do we want to be its opposite? Do we want to be in resistance to love? And we're going to experience what it feels like. And just because we have an awareness, I want to be love. And just because we know, okay, there's a pattern I have in my relationships where I am not acting in a loving way, does not mean that we know what it takes to heal that pattern. Oh, God. Okay. This is where I'm going to cry. And that's that's the element of karma in our own lives. That's the element of repair. That's the element of where we attract relationships that intensify those patterns, that often bring them up and out. And I honestly believe it's because they want to be seen. It's because it wants to be healed. It's because we want to know ourselves. That's what the work is, you know? And whether we do it again and again and again, only to find greater self-awareness, whether we find like, oh, okay, I failed there in that communication. Didn't do that one right today. Okay. This is always the opportunity for our own evolutionary journey to become a healing journey. This is the opportunity that we have, that we get, like, to love ourselves, to figure out, to unpack, to unwind what kind of soul we want to be. So I think I was trying to get to this point, which is, and apologies in advance for this longer video. This full moon that we're having, it's not technically an eclipse because it's further than 10 degrees away from the nodal axis. But I tell you, every part of my being senses that this functions exactly like an eclipse. And it's because it's the first lunation where we're really having the luminaries, the sun and the moon, within the sign degrees, the signs of the eclipse pattern for this eclipse cycle. And so with that, I'm going to be doing a special masterclass. This is actually, it's a live practice class. Instead of just teaching on the eclipses, I am going to be actually practicing with chart participants, with your chart, if you're in the class, to demonstrate, in addition to giving a transmission on the October eclipses, both the new moon in Libra that we'll be having, and then the full moon eclipse will actually be happening in this Taurus Scorpio nodal axis in October. So that will be a whole nother completion cycle. I'll go deeply into those eclipses and then apply the transits to participants' natal charts in the live class. And you can join me for that. The link to register, it's a drop-in class, so it's $15 for existing students. If you've been in any of my classes, Love Evolution or Growing Together, you get that discount. And it's $30 regularly priced. But if you're, if you're a past student member of mine, if you've been in my Evolution student members or in Love Evolution this year, please feel free to use the discounted price and join me for that class. That'll be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to dropping in with folks. And then I'm part of a free panel discussion that is being hosted by my friend Martha Hines from Living the One Light. And I'm going to be with a bunch of other astrologers talking about the upcoming eclipses. You can join me for that. That's this week. And all the registration details are in this post. We end this week with this, energy, this full moon culmination energy. And then the moon applying to the North Node and moving into the sign of Taurus. So I really feel like whatever we're doing right now that is sort of greasing the wheels for this eclipse season, this is your note, to pay attention to what's happening now, because it's sort of like those whispers that I was talking about earlier, the owls, the signs, the synchronicities of what's to come in this upcoming season. But it's also, I think, pointing to deeper changes that are going to be manifesting over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years of our lives. Like, imagine you are seeing the reflections of what your soul is becoming for the remainder of your lives, just in these little glimmers of hope, really, what it is. Wherever we're even seeing discord or challenge or crisis, we are also seeing the opportunity of our own lovability. We are seeing the opportunity of our heart to receive that which it desires most. We are seeing the calling of our soul to become the highest expression of itself, even in the challenges. So every crisis is an opportunity for growth, my friends. Sending you so much love this week. I hope you'll join me for my live class or for the free live eclipse class, and take good care. Get extra rest, extra replenishment and nourishment. Move as slow as you need to in this time to really integrate all that is being felt and learned. I'm sending you so much love. Bye for now, my friends.